All right, well, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming to this session about Slack's awesome first-party tools. I'm excited to talk to you all about some of the tools that Slack has been building to try and make your lives as developers a little bit easier. My goal here is actually to talk to all of you all and start to make you feel a little bit more like power users when you jump into using the Slack platform. And my name is Ankur. I work on the developer relations team. We're a team that's actually that helps build some of these awesome tools. And as somebody who works on the platform, I think a lot about what it takes to make a really good, compelling developer experience, not just a product experience. And I can't help but sometimes draw some parallels to video games. Because for that first level, when you first walk into a video game experience, a lot of times you're shown like one kind of interesting little experience. And you find out something about this world you never explored before. You eat a mushroom, you get a little bit bigger. You can do things like attack different kinds of enemies. And for developers, we call that experience Hello World, right? Like it's that first moment where you say, I've just learned a new capability. There's something here that I didn't know about before, and you start feeling super empowered, super intrigued about what might come next. So right out of that gate, there's that first mushroom or the coin that you got, or a fire flower, and you start to learn that, you start to learn a little bit more about what's going on in this world. You start to figure out which cases you want to reach for which tool, right? So you got to make a long leap over a big platform gap. You're going to go try and see if there's a mushroom around you. Or if you want to make a long-range attack to another enemy, you might try and find that fire flower so you can spit some fireballs. So you start to become accustomed to whatever your toolkit is, what's in your tool belt. And that's what I think leveling up feels like on a platform. It's about knowing exactly what problems can be solved in which ways and how you can find the right tools to do it, and just orienting yourself around that experience. So it all starts with an idea, right? This one's kind of silly. I'm a very lazy, oh wait, this wasn't my idea. Never mind, I'm not the lazy and over-caffeinated individual. But Slack is very fortunate to have an awesome workplace team where some really fantastic humans help us in the coffee bar and make us coffee. So one day I was thinking to myself, wouldn't it be great if I didn't have to wait in line once I got there? What if I could just place that order ahead of time and I would save myself a whole 2 to 4 minutes? Of course, I know this sounds silly, but I think actually a lot of us find inspiration for building ourselves little quick fixes in our everyday work life this way. I mean, you start with something silly like this, but you might eventually say, you know what, I know how to aggregate some diagnostic reports from some equipment, or I know how to automate some part of a sales workflow. But it really, we build tools for ourselves to be able to solve our own problems in the beginning, and then we start understanding where else we can take these possibilities. So I'm going to start with that use case, this use case where we want to build a little app to help us make coffee ordering a little bit easier. So can we switch to the demo, please? So in here, I'm in my Slack workspace. This morning, we got a sneak peek at SDT, the Slack developer tools. I'm going to go ahead. I kind of want to start with a menu for coffee items. I think that might be a good way to start my little coffee app. I don't really know much about formatting or styling. I really just want to do this as quick as possible. So I'm going to click over to the Actions menu and inspect this pretty nice little menu that I saw in Asana. Asana is one of the partners that's already who already has an app with actions in the app directory. So right here, I can take a look. I can see exactly what it looks like when how to build a message that incorporates a menu. And I'm just going to jump over to, oh, hey, message builder, right? That was a pretty cool part of the keynote that we saw. Why don't I see if I could use that? All right, so we're over in Message Builder. I want to start trying to customize this menu a little bit, make it feel like the coffee app that I'm trying to build, right? So why don't I just start changing some of the text around in here. It'll be make a drink order. We can remove some of these fields. They don't look like they're necessary. And maybe what would you like to have? And we don't need a button, so we can go ahead and remove the button, but we will need to customize this menu a little bit. That's not right for us, so let's see. Options. There's just a big array of text and values. I guess I could just replace those. Cool. So now I got something that looks a little bit more like a menu you might use to select yourself a drink. Not bad, right? We still haven't. What I love about this experience so far is I haven't had to open a code editor. I haven't had to write anything yet, but the platform feels alive. I can start testing it out, poking, prodding, and learning a little bit more about what the capabilities are, kind of like that first level. So can we switch the slides, please? So we just saw here were Slack Developer Tools and Message Builder working hand in hand. To summarize, Slack Developer Tools was the way that we were able to inspect the JSON structure of a message. You could also use it for various other use cases. We saw some of these showcased in the keynote this morning. You could use it to invoke various web API methods. And also, one of the things that I think is super valuable is you can painlessly traverse the authentication prompts. A lot of times, the biggest hurdle in starting to build an app is actually trying to figure out, how do I get the right tokens? And Slack Developer Tools will help you out with that process in a way that feels transparent and feels like you're not getting stuck in the weeds of things. And then there was Message Builder. Message Builder is a live updating preview of whatever you want to build inside Slack. So this is super useful. I've seen it being used by design teams. And one of the greatest parts about the Message Builder is the URL is also live updating, and a lot of people don't realize that. So as you're editing a message, you can send that off to a colleague and ask, hey, what does this look like? Do you think I could improve anything? Should I change the color? Should I change the text or the copy? So these are all really cool ways to start touching the platform without even having to write any code. Could I switch to demo, please? So in the next demo, we want to start actually doing something with this message that we just formatted really nice. So one of the other things that we offer, oh boy, reload, yay, is the Open API Spec. Now the Open API Spec is a JSON file that describes all of the web APIs that Slack offers in one big blob. Why is this useful? It's an open standard. It's not a proprietary format that we came up with. So there's actually an entire ecosystem of tools out there that will use the Open API Spec to help you build requests or to visualize data or maybe even implement some testing in your app. So one of the things that I love to do with these API specs when I find them around the web is to import them in a tool that I often use called Postman. So I'm just going to take this raw JSON here off of GitHub. By the way, it's hosted on the Slack API GitHub where a lot of our tools are hosted that you should check out if you get a chance. And then I'm going to go ahead and import. So this is Postman. It's basically a GUI client for invoking web APIs or RESTful or HTTP-based APIs. And they have this handy feature where you can actually import a collection based on an Open API spec. So I just paste that in, and I'm not going to hit import here because I've already done it a little bit ahead of time. But essentially, you'll end up with a browsable, clickable menu of all of the methods in the Slack API. Now, this is super useful for being able to switch back and forth between testing out method implementations and understanding what the request and what the response look like. So we have that that little menu that we wanted to build, right? So why don't we try sending that out to Slack? The method that I'm going to want to use here is called chat.postMessage. So I've already got it loaded right here. In the headers, I've already kind of populated in my app's token. So this is the point in your process where you typically want to go out, create an app on the Slack API web page, and plop in your token to make sure that you're doing it the right way. So I'm going to go ahead and add in our little drink menu order. Now there's one item missing from this, which is our channel argument. A quick little tip trick that you may not be aware of is if you're browsing Slack and you're opened up to a channel, the channel ID is actually right here in the URL bar. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy that, throw that in, hit send. Oops. And take a look. We got our little drink order menu rendered right in here. So that's great. I still haven't had to write any code. I've just been copying and pasting things, and I'm still already almost there. I just need to figure out how to take that order. Wonderful. So if we could switch back to slides, please. To summarize, the Open API spec is, again, a machine-readable format. In this demo, I showed how you could use Postman to create a library of requests to trigger the web API and to try out any methods that you might want to. But I've also seen projects out there that utilize this open format to go as far as to generate an entire library in your favorite programming language to use as an SDK. So we're really excited about the possibilities of Open API. We've also released specifications in Async API for the Events API, as well as added new Open API version 3 support to our specs on GitHub. Can we switch to demo, please? So I've been avoiding writing code because that's the part where I feel like I need to start actually doing real work. But as I said, I'm lazy, so let's go ahead and actually start doing some of this work. All right, so what I have here is a basic Express app. I'm going to be using Node.js for this demo, and I'm going to be demonstrating some of our first-party tools, our SDKs. But notably, there actually is a set of tools that we have in Python, and there's a great community of community-authored tools out there as well. So for anybody who's used Express or Node.js, this probably looks familiar. This is basically the hello world of writing a web app in Node. I'm going to go ahead and start by importing a library. This is the Slack Events API library. It gives you one method, this create event adapter method, that you can call with your verification token. So one of the greatest things about the first-party tools that we have to offer is we built in a lot of the best practices that we've seen, and we've built in a lot of use cases that we believe patterns that we believe give you good security, good sane defaults, and just a good overall experience. You'll notice that in this case, the method straight up asks for the verification token up front, and that's because on every incoming request, the Events API adapter will take care of checking your verification before it ever lets your app even see the request. Now, we just call one more method on the Slack Events API adapter called Express Middleware. And for anybody that's familiar with the Express framework, it's just the easy way to plug in the building blocks of the framework itself. And it just takes all you want to do is make sure that it's available at the URL that you have configured for your app to send its events to. Now I have to start thinking about how do I actually want this menu to appear in my app. It's not going to just post itself randomly, right? Like there has to be something that triggers it. Well, the Events API is a great starting point for triggering workflows in your own app. And right here I'm using a specific event called an app mention. And what I think is really great about this event is that it doesn't actually require any permissions for your app to read any messages coming out of a channel. It's completely passive. Unless somebody actually mentions your app with an app mention, you won't actually have to worry about where that data goes and how to secure it. It just solves so many of those sort of privacy-related issues without you even having to think about it. So now that I have a place to hook into, the Slack Events API adapter will actually ingest that HTTP request and invoke my handler right here. Well, what do I want to do in this handler? Of course, I want to go ahead and send that menu back out, right? So I'm going to bring in one more handy tool from our first-party toolkit called the Slack Node Sdk. The web client that comes out of the Slack Node SDK is just a really easy wrapper for using all of our web API methods and endpoints. It does, again, the right thing by asking you for your authentication token up front, which I've brought in through an environment variable. And then it gives you an awesome little interface where you can start calling web API methods directly on the actual instance. Now, I see something pretty interesting happening here. Does anybody else see what's going on? We're getting auto-completion on the web API. I mean, my IDE doesn't know anything really about Slack. How did that happen? Not only are we figuring out what the method names are, but it's telling me what kind of arguments it takes without me having to do much. This is thanks to some of the latest work we've done in the Node SDK. I'm in a regular JavaScript file. If you take a look, my file name here is just demo.js. But we've actually taken the time to describe all of the data types in the Events API request parameters using TypeScript metadata. And what TypeScript does for us is it brings this like rich experience right into your editor. And it doesn't matter, I'm using VS Code here. It doesn't really matter what editor you're using. There's probably an extension available. There's probably some great tooling around TypeScript and the work that that team has been doing that can do something similar for you. And it's great because this really saves me the round trip effort of having to go out to the docs just to check, oh, does this thing take a string? And what is the name of the text that I have to send? Is it text or message? So I really love using the JavaScript SDK because it helps me save time this way. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just copy the message that we took out of Postman and provide it here. Great. I'm going to make one simple substitution here, which is I don't necessarily always want to go back to the same exact channel that we tested the event out in. I actually want to send it back to the channel where the user had mentioned my app. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to event.channel. Now, there's one thing that we haven't figured out yet, and it was still kind of a problem back in the way that we saw our app before. What happens when you click one of these menu options? Well, Slack's APIs have another section called interactive components. And with interactive components, you get a chance to react to button presses, menu selections, dialogues, and today with message actions. So I'm going to go ahead and import another handy tool that we have. I'm going to go ahead and create a new instance of that one as well. The Slack interactive messages component is super similar to the Events API component. It gives you those same great defaults, that same secure processing of each incoming request, and it enables you to just start thinking about how you're actually going to integrate this into your project. So I'm going to go ahead and mount it in the exact same way. All right, we're ready to go. Oops. Okay, cool. So now that we have the interactive messages component imported, all we have to really do is route the incoming message requests out to our handlers. And just like the Events API, we get a handy little syntax for routing these handlers, and it's just using a method called actions. The first argument of action is going to be its matching constraints, and that's described as either a string or a callback ID that you created when you were you assigned when you were creating the action. So in this case, I'm just going to say order coffee. And then we're going to use a callback. Before we move on, we want to make sure that that order coffee callback ID is also represented in the menu that was sent. Great. There's one more cool thing the interactive messages adapter does for you that the events adapter didn't necessarily have to deal with, and that is the asynchronous timing of events. Now, typically when you're using the interactive messages framework, you want to be able to respond to an incoming request within 3 seconds. And that's because if you don't, the user's going to see an error. And that's no good for anybody, right? It makes you look bad, it makes Slack look bad, and you want to make sure that your users understand exactly what's going on when you submit an action. So what the interactive messages adapter does is it allows you to just worry about doing the action, and you can return a JavaScript promise. And it doesn't actually matter when that promise resolves. The interactive message adapter will do the right thing by responding with an OK acknowledgement request if your promise doesn't resolve within a specified timeout. And if it happens later, we'll end up using an asynchronous response URL to go ahead and update the message. So this entire problem is completely invisible to you. So what I'll do here is I'll just return a new promise. And for demo purposes, my promise will never really fail, but we resolve the promise with a simple message. And in this case, I'll just say, thank you. Your order has been received. Cool. Can we switch back to slides, please? Great. So what you saw just now was the Events API for Node and the Interactive Messages adapter for Node working together. And like I said earlier, we actually have very similar products available for you to use in Python as well. Now the Node API, the Events API adapter for Node has the semantics of a normal event emitter that you're used to using in Node. This is a very common paradigm. It's super seamless, and it gives you all those same defaults without you having to think about them. The Interactive Messages module lets you handle button clicks, menu selections, and dialogues, and it gives you even a fine-grained control over the selectors you use to constrain them. Today I showed you how to use a callback ID, but you can also constrain your callbacks by what type of interaction it was and what the values were inside of the interaction. You can respond both synchronously or asynchronously, and that's kind of up to you. I have one last demo, so can we please switch over to demo? Great. Now, before I start socializing this neat little coffee app that I've been building with all my other friends and tell them how great it is and try and get everybody to get on board, I want to make sure that this is something that works and it will continue to work. Because we all know that people are going to come ask me for new features, and I'm going to have to develop them, and I'm going to have to say yes to some, and I'm going to have to say no to some. But in the end, the core functionality, I want to make sure it's rock solid, right? So the dreaded task, we have to write tests. So writing tests has been one of those sticky areas that's plagued Slack app developers for quite a long time. And the reason is because you're kind of always playing this whack-a-mole game with the API. Every day, the Slack API, the Slack platform deploys multiple times. And sometimes a request or a response might contain more data or less data than you expected than the last time. And this is natural. A lot of people have gone about solving this problem by building mock objects to put inside their application when they're running in test mode. Now, that's a completely valid approach, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when I started thinking more about the problem of what was actually going on, I thought there was room to try and describe a new solution to this. And the team got together, and we worked on that solution, and the embodiment of that solution is our tool called Steno. Steno is a testing framework that allows you, or it's actually a testing helper, sorry, that allows you to, that embraces this idea that the Slack platform is constantly changing. So it flips the conversation from how do we get great mocks and make sure that they're in sync with the platform to how do we make it as cheap as possible to record and replay requests that are coming out of the Slack API so that when inevitably the Slack API's values change, it's super quick and easy for us to patch our tests and to make sure that everything still works. So that's what Steno does. Steno is programmed to record and replay incoming requests coming out of your app as well as requests coming into your app from Slack. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys as the audience and say that we had this amazing demo, and backstage certain things stopped working. But what I will be able, so I won't be able to run Steno for you here, but what I will be able to do is to walk you through some of the test code that in a sample app that uses Steno successfully today. So, what Steno gives you is a directory full of scenarios. And a scenario is basically, it gives you a directory full of scenarios, and within each scenario, there are a directory of interactions. And an interaction is basically one HTTP request and HTTP response in a really plain, readable format. You can always come back and hand edit these later. You can try out new things and new behaviors that you can't even reproduce in the wild just by jumping into the scenarios and making those changes for yourself. After you run Steno in record mode, you're going to want to write some tests. Now, this is not as hard as it sounds because your app is already doing the work. All you really have to do is make some substitutions around what tokens you're using and what URLs you're sending your requests to. So in this case, what I've done is I've just made sure that I've set my environment variables to a fake token and hard-coded in some URLs that I can use for this test case. And then I need to start Steno up in replay mode. So the way that it works is in replay mode, Steno will read from that directory of interactions and load them up in sequence and say, hey, I gotta replay this first interaction, and that's actually a request coming out of Slack into the app. So it'll go ahead and send those requests to your app. It'll also wait for requests coming out of your app. And every time any of these interactions run, it's keeping a running history. So in order to keep that history accurate, what you'll have to do is to tell Steno using its control API when to start and stop a specific scenario. The control API is nothing more than a couple RESTful endpoints. In this test case, I've wrapped it in a little helper method, but as you can see, there's just a port that Steno is listening on, and I just call start on it with the name of a scenario as a JSON object. When I'm done with the test, all I do is do the same, except I call stop. And after I stop a test, I'll end up back with a payload that looks a lot, that actually describes the interaction history that actually occurred. So my code here, right after I'm done stopping the replay, I have an object called history. Within history, there is some metadata about the requests, including how many incoming requests were matched or were unmatched during that time. It's a really good idea at the end of your test case to just make sure both of those values are 0. Then you're absolutely sure that there wasn't anything in that test that didn't actually run. In addition, you should always try to test out the actual behavior of your app. So if you wanted to make sure something was added to your database, go ahead and write the code to make sure it was added to your database. You can also reach into the specific interactions within a test case, within the history, and find out if the message looks like what you expect it to look. In this case, this app is assigning tickets to users who interact with it. And I can actually reach inside the text of that request and make sure it has the exact copy that I was hoping for. Can we switch back to slides, please? So Steno is scenario-based testing for your Slack apps. It exists as a proxy between your app and Slack, and it records your app's interactions in real time. But we only want you to use that in development. We would never want you to do this in production. Those recordings are then reused as the scenarios in which you conduct replay, and that happens at test time. When you're replaying these behaviors, you want to be able to verify that the results are what you expect. And new in version 1.2 of Steno, we have just released a new command line option on the tool itself called replace tokens. Because the natural next step, once you've developed your test suite, is to check that code back into your repository and make sure that on every check-in, your continuous integration verifies that the behavior is still correct. But we would never want you to commit sensitive data like Slack tokens or other API tokens. So what we've done is to take that problem out of the equation, and while you're in record mode, we substitute fake tokens into those interactions for you. So thanks for coming to this session and hearing more about the tools that we develop here at Slack to make your lives easier as developers. I hope you have started to feel like you're leveling up a little more, start to feel like you're more of a power user of the API, and sooner or later, you're going to be that invincible Mario moonwalking through Goombas. Thank you.